Welcome to Two Angry Men, the newest podcast with Los Angeles Magazine's own Mark Geragos and TMZ's Harvey Levin, where the two get together and talk about the biggest legal stories of the day. Enjoy.
You are going to depose Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, who else?
Anyone that can provide evidence in this case is going to be deposed.
That's Taylor Swift. She was there.
She was there for that meeting.
Okay, well, I'm a lawyer. I know what that means. Welcome to the brand new Two Angry Men podcast. I'm Harvey Levin.
I'm Mark Geragos, and I have one question, though. Who named this Two Angry Men? I am angry, but who named this?
And we were just kicking it around the office, and everybody said it fit. By the way, before we start, can I just ask, who puts a picture of themselves on the wall?
That isn't me. That's my father, which, by the way, I noticed that.
Are you kidding? That's your dad?
That's my dad, who, by the way, to show how far back I go with you and the fact that you think that that's me, yeah, thanks a lot. That was him when he was 80-something, I think, or almost 90.
Oh, my God. Yeah, we do go back.
Yeah.
Okay.
We go back so far that he was the calendar. I tell this story to people. They don't believe me. He was the calendar deputy for Judge Joe
Wapner. That's right. I remember you telling me that.
Yes. He was the calendar deputy DA in Wapner's court. And Wapner later went on to fame as
the People's Court judge.
And who was the attaché who would ambush people? It was you. It was Harvey running out there with the mic saying, how do you feel about
that was the second run. The first run, I was just his legal clerk. Okay, look, I want to start with something. I just want to explain that the reason I've been thinking about doing a podcast forever, and I couldn't think of a partner that I really wanted to do this with. And you and I were talking a couple of months ago, and it just occurred to me that we both have been in this business, in the business of pop culture, in different ways for decades. And the way
we have fought
hard.
We have fought very hard over the years. I remember one instance where I was here. I'm in New York today, but I was in New York. I was in I want to say a hotel bar, and I was screaming so loud at you that they actually asked me to leave the hotel.
You know what? It is a one-way street because I always try to calm it down when we speak, which is usually not is not my nature, but it's true.
I don't know that I buy any of that.
You have grievances. But the one thing I think that we always agree on is that the way the media presents what goes on in Hollywood, entertainment, pop culture is largely BS, that they're playing a game that is not real.
It's exactly right.
I want to start with Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. I'm just going to put it out there. This case is never going to trial. This case will never see a courtroom. This case was never filed to be tried. It was filed for PR on both sides.
How ironic is it? And I've been laughing to anybody, and in full disclosure, Bryan Freedman, who is Baldoni's lawyer, is one of my closest friends in the world, and I work with him on many cases. And I have told him that right now he should get some kind of an award for raising the Titanic, because ultimately
that's true.
It's true. Have you ever seen such a turnaround?
It's amazing. You're absolutely right. That Baldoni at the beginning of this, when Blake filed her lawsuit, he was cooked. And
totally cooked.
And I think Brian turned it around.
Oh, he's not only turned it around. I was going to say the irony is that the Blake Lively team or posse, whatever you want to call it, they go and they basically hoodwink the New York Times. And the hoodwinking is, we later learn, is they just give for whatever reason, the New York Times a story. New York Times decides they're going to run with it. Brian then he basically, as the kids say, or he would say, the kids say, he has the receipts. He then files against the New York Times, then flattens it out from there to sue her. And then Blake Lively's team runs into the Southern District here and says, hey, Judge, we want a gag order. You got to shut up Bryan Freedman. And I'm saying, really? You're the ones who took shots fired.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into that because it wasn't really a gag order. And I think the whole thing that the judge did was just dumb. But let's get into it in a minute. I want to know if you agree with me. And I know he's a friend of yours, but when you look at what this is about, I mean, Justin Baldoni is suing Blake Lively for $400 million, the New York Times for $250 million. This is ridiculous that on both sides, these are actors who got into a fight and hated each other, and they hired PR people, and both sides tried to take the other side down, which is what they do all the time. And I know that because we're on the receiving end of both sides calling us, trying to trash the other side. So it's almost like goose eggs for both of them. And I don't think either of them really wanted or expected to get money. What they wanted was to tank the other person and maintain their career.
Well, it's funny you say that, because when I was reading the articles this morning that were covering yesterday's appearance, I was thinking to myself, can you imagine putting this, because I always go to putting it in front of a jury. When a case comes in or somebody tells me about their case, I always think, how am I going to argue this in front of a jury? And I'm thinking, how are you going to argue this and try to find somebody who's going to be sympathetic?
But in this case, I mean, it reminds me of the Gwyneth Paltrow ski accident case, that you got these two rich people and they're making tons of money off a movie. You know, I want to say they don't like each other, but I got this feeling that there's this love-hate thing between the two of them, that it was just too incendiary. And I don't know what caused the whole thing to go south, but what I found really interesting is that Ryan Reynolds started inserting himself. Taylor Swift then started inserting herself. And it just felt like this entertainment squabble. And I know she's made sexual harassment allegations and he's made his allegations. But when it comes down to it, I mean, to me, and especially when you read all the texts and the emails, it's like they don't want to go to trial. Do you think Blake Lively and Taylor Swift and Ryan Reynolds want to get deposed?
No,
and testify?
I think that you describe what's really going on here. I think that there was, when you say a love, there was a very flirtatious relationship. And I think Ryan Reynolds inserted himself here and said, I'm going to take this guy down. I think that that's kind of what has evolved down in this. I think, and you're absolutely right, they are not going to let her. Blake Lively.
No way.
Pose.
No way. Because it's career ending if you have to go through all this stuff on the stand. I mean, right now, I think Blake Lively thought, I'm going to file this thing. New York Times is going to write this story and we're going to win the PR battle. And I think that's what they expected to do. I don't know that they expected him to come out and do what he did, but I don't think that look, Justin Baldoni is winning this right now. More people know who he is today than they did 6 months ago. And I don't think the majority of people dislike him. I think what's happened is...
No. In fact, he benefits by the fact that he literally, his stature was such that he's been able to kind of create who he is on defense. I mean, his defense has been offensively brilliant.
Yeah. So now answer my question. Was this filed for legal reasons or PR reasons?
Oh, I think clearly this is totally generated by PR reasons on both sides. And I will tell you why. The first thing was they did not file a lawsuit. People have to understand that this was a claim. This was the precondition to filing a lawsuit. This was a way to take that, file that, use that to get the interest of the New York Times,
right,
to kind of the catnip for them to take the bait, to have them not, basically, they thought they would be insulated, and they may still well be, They thought they'd be insulated because they're reporting on a legal document. So even though this legal document technically wasn't a lawsuit, that would give them the immunity. Then they went for it. They didn't do their due diligence. That at least is obvious to me. So then the question is, does that become malice? What is the irony that in this kind of trend that
But you're saying malice because they're both celebrities and you have to show that in order to win.
Correct. And you got to show, remember the first lawsuit that Bryan filed was against the New York Times, against the New York Times.
Right. And they're saying it was a reckless disregard for the truth or it was intentional.
And that wouldn't it be ironic if this is the case that the Supreme Court revisits the malice standard for the media?
So you agree that this was PR motivated, this case. Now
Correct.
The question, does either side really want to go to trial here, or is this going to get quietly dismissed? Nobody pays anything. They've done what they've done. And Justin kind of wins this because his popularity rating and just people knowing who he is has increased. And so he has a reason to just walk away from it at this point. And she has a reason to walk away because she doesn't want to get deposed. She doesn't want Ryan to get deposed. And she certainly doesn't want Taylor to get deposed. And Taylor will put pressure on her for that.
Well, I think that you have to remember, this is a federal district court case.
Right.
This is not a state court case like Heard v. Depp or Depp v. Heard, or like the ski case that you mentioned. Both of those were state court cases where you had the potential for wall-to-wall coverage, TV coverage. You don't have that in federal district court.
Right.
So there's no way that you're going to use a trial to somehow get vindicated. And a deposition, remember what a deposition is. You know this better than anybody. A deposition is one lawyer who's adverse to you taking your deposition.
On camera.
On camera without a judge to sustain objections. And the only thing that you can object on is the basis of privilege or something akin to privilege. So you've got to answer everything. So every laundry list of dirty deed that you have ever done could be fair game. No way she's going to submit to that.
So this case goes away and never goes to trial.
And I think on Baldoni's terms, because I think he has got the idea of his damages. He's the one who optioned this. He's the one who had the sequel rights. He's the one who's got all of the real kind of quantifiable damages, so to speak, so that if you ever get into a mediated setting, and for those
What damages does he have? The guy, I know he said that my career has suffered and William Morris dropped him and all, and I get it.
No, I don't think that's his damages.
Well, then what are his damages?
I think it's the franchise. I think it's the fact that he went out. This was his passion project. He had expended all kinds of effort on this.
There's no way he can win that. There's no way he can win that against Blake because it's too complicated. Sony ended up siding with Blake Lively, so he can just say, look, or she can just say, look, we disagreed, and the studio decided that they were going to be on my side.
Yeah, but do you know why that happened? You don't think that
Ryan Reynolds?
What? Yeah, I was going to say, you don't think that had to do with Ryan Reynolds?
Okay, but that doesn't mean you're going to win $400 million, Mark. Come on. I mean, it's ridiculous.
This is one of those too big to try. You've heard of too big to fail. This is too big to try. This isn't even bet the house on it. This is bet the career. There's too much money between Ryan Reynolds, Blake Lively, the studios involved. It's too big for them to roll the dice.
I agree with that. I got to tell you something really hysterical that I saw just a couple hours ago. So the Daily Mail just published an exclusive story, and the story has to do with Justin Baldoni. And this is a good thing he did, that they're saying that they can reveal that Justin allowed two families that lost their homes in the fires in L.A. To live at his home while Justin and his wife were on vacation. So good thing that he did, for sure. Right. How did the Daily Mail get that story, do you suppose, Mark?
Well, all you have to do is scroll X, and you can see who is doing whose dirty deed, so to speak,
I
which
mean,
takes us full circle
it's
to
so
yesterday.
obvious.
Yeah, to yesterday in the courtroom. And you are absolutely right. It wasn't a gag order, although the Lively team in the lead up was talking about it as if it was a gag order, and it was being reported as if it were a gag order, which was not true.
So here's what it was,
was
because this is so stupid, that there is a code of professional conduct that lawyers have to abide by. The state bar enforces it. Judges don't enforce that. The state bar enforces it. So what the judge did, what Blake Lively's team did is they said, there's a state bar rule that says you can't unduly influence and prejudice a jury before a trial. And the judge said, yeah, I want you to abide by that rule. You cannot unfairly. It's like, how stupid. It's like, what lawyer doesn't try and prejudice a jury? I mean, that's
so
the
funny.
point. That's the
So
point.
funny. When I pick a jury, I often will tell jurors that very same thing. I'll say, we're up here. You just heard from the judge. The judge told you that we're not supposed to prejudge or anything else. Of course, we're trying to prejudice.
Of course.
I mean, why else? It's jury 101. And by the way, ordering somebody to abide by the code of ethics is like saying obey the law.
Right.
I mean,
it means nothing. It was a dumb thing to go into court over, and for the judge to even entertain it. It's sort of like, yeah, I mean, that's a state bar issue, so the state bar will take it up. It's not a legal thing.
And he said, to his credit, he came out, and if you believe what was reported, I was just reading the article, he came out and he said to Lively's people, I came out here and I was not inclined to order this. And he didn't say because it's stupid, but it was kind of the implication. But the parties had already agreed that they would abide by it. It's a stipulation. We're not going to violate the law.
Okay. Now we have Lively-Baldoni's attorney on, Brian Friedman. Brian, welcome.
How are you, Harvey?
I'm good. So can I throw this out, because I have a feeling you are going to be angry, but I'm just going to, in full disclosure, tell you what I said, and I believe what Mark said. I don't think this case is ever going to trial. I think you've kind of won the PR battle, and I feel like this case was filed for PR reasons more than legal reasons, and you won it. Nobody wants to sit for depots. Nobody wants to go on the stand. I don't see this case ever going to trial.
And to be fair, what I said is, if I'm representing Blake Lively, I am going to do virtually anything to not let Bryan Freedman depose my client.
You know what? I'm not really sure, whether it's going to go to trial or not go to trial, but I just know one thing. Justin is really is a great guy. I wish this was more about him and less about negativity, frankly.
Don't you feel like you've won this PR war now?
It's not even about winning a PR war. Honestly, it's about saving someone's life. I mean, imagine, Harvey, you being accused of something that you just didn't do. You just weren't part of, and you're caught up in this, and you're a real decent human being. And this is a powerful thing that you're going through, and your whole career seems to have been gone and vanished before your very eyes.
I'm confused about that. I know William Morris dropped Justin, but at the same time, more people know who this guy is than they did before this. And just in terms of, the street Nielsen's that I see, just in terms of, what comes at us here at TMZ, that Blake was winning at the beginning and it turned around and she's not now. So isn't it mission accomplished? Because, I know you're suing for huge numbers, but especially your lawsuit against Blake. I feel like her lawsuit was a PR to try and salvage PR, and his was a reaction to that. And hasn't that all kind of been settled at this point?
I think what hasn't been settled is the fact that they've lost 4 projects, significant projects, the studio. There's obviously the reputational and emotional distress harm. He's got 2 little kids that pay attention to to, what goes on in the world. His wife is devastated, and and there's others involved in this too that have lost significant business and personal relationships.
I've said it a million times that you raised the Titanic in this case because, but for Bryan Freedman, Justin Baldoni would have been crushed in this matter. And that's where it was headed. And it was headed for him to be crushed. When you see the kinds of things that were left on the cutting room floor, literally, in that New York Times article, it's infuriating.
But that's against the New York Times. And I get that, and that is kind of separate. I guess what I'm wondering is if Blake Lively, the last thing she wants is to take the stand. She doesn't want her husband to take the stand. She doesn't want Taylor Swift to take the stand, nor do they want to take the stand. So if they came to you and just said, we will basically call this a massive misunderstanding, can we just drop it? Would you entertain it? I'm curious.
I mean, he was called a sexual predator. So are they saying he's still a sexual predator, but it's a misunderstanding?
Harvey, when you're in the middle of representing one of these people who's in the eye of a storm, and Brian's done it a zillion times, I've done it a fair amount of times, you need to be vindicated. Because at the end of the day, you're not, no amount of money will get you back to square zero. To your point, Harvey, as many people didn't know Baldoni as they knew Lively. However, Lively, be careful what you wish for, has, the public has gone full Amber Heard on her. And Baldoni could have been defined, as Brian just said, as the sexual predator, but for the magnificent job he's done here. So, it's a horrible body blow to have to take and have, can't leave your house. I don't know, and I haven't asked you this, Brian, but I'm going to assume he's got round the clock security and his family's had to be relocated and the whole bit.
I mean, there's certainly that invasion of privacy that goes on, but I think it's not so much having something to do with me that turned the tide. I mean, the reason to put the information out there is just because of who he is. It's the truth. It's just the truth. And the reality is that had there been these horrible things, and had there been these horrible text messages, had there been this horrible information, that stuff would have been put out there too.
I appreciate your humility, but you and I both know, and I think Harvey would say the same, a lot of lawyers in your position would have just rolled over and played dead. That's unfortunate. They would not have thought back and just would have thought there's no way to stem this tide. It's a tsunami coming at me.
Yeah. So Mark and I were talking about something before you jumped on. The whole thing is curious, the way Ryan Reynolds got so involved in this, that there was that meeting at their penthouse where he confronted Justin and allegedly screamed at Justin. And we were talking about what brought all of this on. Was it that Blake was going home and expressing her dismay at things that were happening with him? Or was this, I mean, people are kind of talking about this online, kind of a love-hate kind of thing, where all of a sudden Ryan is just saying, just stop it, everybody. And, I'm not saying that happened, but people are talking that way. So I'm just wondering what you think the motivation was where this turned into nuclear war.
Well, as we have alleged in our complaint, that this was a takeover of a movie. And whether we find out exactly what the reasons for the takeover were and who was behind the takeover, I think that we're going to find some interesting documents when discovery starts. And I'm looking forward to discovery, because when you start to look into what was in Stephanie Jones's hands and what was in Leslie Sloan's hands and what was in Blake Lively's text messages, and what those discussions were like, I think we're going to find the answers to this really quickly.
You are going to depose Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, Taylor Swift. Who else?
Well, I don't know that we're going to depose Taylor Swift or not.
Really?
I think that that's going to be, probably a game time decision. I don't know that decision's been made, but I can tell you this: there's anyone that reasonably has information that can be that can provide evidence in this case is going to be deposed. I
That's
mean, for
Taylor
sure.
Swift. She was there for that meeting.
She was there for that meeting.
Okay, well, I'm a lawyer. I know what that means. and that's why I'm just thinking that even when you take Blake and Ryan out of it in terms of how they personally feel about it all. I mean, to say that we're going to put Taylor Swift in the middle of this whole thing, I think they are going to do everything they can to avoid going to court, because the last thing they want is to have their friend, the biggest star in the world now, sitting on a stand being grilled by Bryan Freedman.
My assumption is that they're going to probably take some legal actions that are beyond the bounds of decency, and we'll see if they can try to avoid a deposition.
How could they do that if there's relevance?
I'm going to object and order the witness not to testify.
You're not his lawyer. You're his friend. Jeez.
Mark is usually my lawyer, though.
I'm working here, guys. I mean, come on.
I know you're working. So am I. So there you go. So am I. Brian, I have a question, and you don't have to answer it if you think it skirts it. We were talking early on that when Judge Lyman came out yesterday on the record, so I'm not trying to influence anybody or get anybody sideways. He had mentioned that he was not inclined to order compliance with the New York rule. But that because stipulation of the parties, he had reconsidered. Do you want to describe what that means? Because we took a flyer, and I want to make sure we got it right.
Look, I think that every lawyer intends to follow the professional rules of conduct, and that's there's been every intention to do that in this case, and we believe we've followed the professional rules of conduct, and the professional rule of conduct at issue, talks about an exception. And that exception is when your client is prejudiced by, public information that's not generated by you, but in fact generated by a third party or the other party. And all we're trying to do is have a fair process. That's all.
I got to tell you, I have covered so many cases. O.J. Simpson case was my life for a long, long time. And Rodney King was my life. And every day, both sides tried to prejudice the jury pool. And ultimately, it didn't matter. And that's what lawyers do anyway. They're not there to say, I'm just going to be a straight shooter. They're advocates. The idea that you can taint a jury by holding a news conference and talking about a text, to me, is so ridiculous. And you look at O.J. Simpson, and, I reported every day there was blood going from the bodies to his bathroom, and he was acquitted. So the idea that a jury is somehow going to remember what Brian Friedman or the other side said, a year before a trial, to me is just, I think the rule is stupid. Both of you guys represent a lot of famous people, and that trials are kind of two-pronged. One, you want to win the case that's before you, but then you want to make sure that the person's life is okay once the trial is over, and that they still have a career, and they can make money, they can support their family. And that element is what lawyers do outside the courtroom. And so I always thought when judges say, no, muzzle yourself, they're not allowing you to fully represent a client.
I don't think that's what the judge is saying at all, is muzzle yourself. I think the judge is really saying, act in accordance with, professional, the professional rules.
But what does that mean? What does that mean?
I think it means that if there's prejudice to your client as a result of something that you didn't cause, that was caused by someone else or something else, that you are allowed to put forth evidence to make sure that that prejudice is remedied.
So how does Justin feel now? Does he feel like there is kind of a move toward understanding and believing him more? Is he taking solace in that? Is he still, devastated? Is the entertainment industry backing away from him? Have they come back? What's going on in his world?
I think he feels, really concerned about all of this and really sad about all of it for everybody that's involved. I think he goes through, emotions that everyone goes through in these types of situations. But he's a really decent human being and a decent person, and has really been very fair and not wanting to attack anyone. But he is, he's devastated as anyone would be. He's, and the studio has lost hundreds of millions of dollars. And as we've put forth in the complaint, there are significant damages that he's suffered, and the emotional distress, having represented a number of people who have been involved in these situations, the emotional distress that people go through, and how difficult it is to walk through an airport, to walk through, your daily life, to be with your children, to try to, be a normal father or husband, and any of it, with all of this weighing on you is just tremendously taxing. And he's going through it, like they all go through it. And we're just, he's going to keep his head held high and tell the truth and be honest and be honorable, and we know that will serve him.
Brian, thank you. You are our first guest on our first Two Angry Men podcast, so thanks for jumping on.
Okay, well, I hope I don't get sanctioned as a result of it. So, but I'm sure you guys will indemnify me, so we'll be good.
What could go wrong? Thank you, Brian.
All right, take care.
Okay, Mark, we'll talk next week.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys.